Thinking Aloud. Conversations on the leading edge of knowledge and discovery with psychologist Jeffrey Mishlove.
Hello and welcome. I'm Jeffrey Mishlove. We'll be exploring America's Psychic Spy program today. With me is Dr. Ed May, who is the head of research for the Stargate program from 1985 until it closed in 1996. He is also the recipient of a Lifetime Career Award from the Parapsychological Association, and he is the co-author of several books, including ESP Wars, East and West, and Anomalous Cognition, Remote Viewing, Research and Theory. He is also the co-editor of a 2-volume anthology called Extrasensory Perception, Support, Skepticism, and Science. Welcome, Ed.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to be with you. You have the distinction of having spent your entire adult career as a full-time parapsychologist.
That's true. From, I think, late 1975 all the way through 1995. It was a full-blown career. I had no other job but parapsychology. It was quite a privilege. I loved it.
And I suppose it's fair to say for any people who are watching the video and are aspiring to such a career, that's quite rare.
Extremely rare. In fact, as far as I know, I might be the only person that had no other job to do. I mean, there have been people in the field around much longer than I've been, but I don't think they had nothing other to do than parapsychology.
Yeah. Well, in a way, you and I are the inverse of each other because I'm the only person with a doctoral diploma that says parapsychology, and I haven't worked one day as a full-time paid parapsychologist.
That's a great point. I'm jealous. I wish I had a diploma also. Mine says physics and no one cares.
Yeah. Well, it's important that physicists are involved in the field because the fundamental principles of information transmission that seem to be involved in extrasensory perception require some understanding of physics, and it still seems to elude us.
Yeah, that's really true. It's a very tough problem. Let's suppose someone's going to generate a remote viewing target, per se, in Bombay, India tomorrow. Yeah. How does that information get from way over there to here now? Big mystery.
But it does.
It does, yes.
At least on occasion.
Well, at least on occasion. More than just a few occasions.
Well, you began your career not doing work in military intelligence. You really were curious about exploring the field of parapsychology.
Not true. I'd never heard of it before.
Well, I remember, I knew you back in those days.
Oh, not in the early days. 1971 you didn't.
No, I think we met in about 73, Ed.
That's true. Really? Okay, yeah. I'm glad.
I remember introducing you to Uri Geller.
Oh, that's also true.
Yeah.
I did my first PK experiment when I was a postdoc in physics at the University of California at Davis. Long story short, we built the most expensive, elaborate Interstate 80 truck detector.
You were working with John Youngerman.
I was working with John Youngerman.
The physics department there. I remember all of that quite well.
I forget it. Would you please tell me what I did back then?
Well, one of the things is you point out, you discovered that trucks going down Highway 80 were able to disturb this very sensitive apparatus for measuring PK.
Exactly.
Yeah.
My real introduction to parapsychology came through Charlie Tart, Professor Tart at UC Davis.
Yes.
He had a weekend seminar with out-of-body experiences, and Bob Monroe was the speaker. And I arrogantly thought, well, if this businessman can do it, I'm a physicist, I can do that. I bought the book, and I really struggled for about 20 minutes. Nothing happened. I put it aside.
So you're not a psychic yourself?
Definitely not.
But eventually you came to become the director for more than a decade of one of the most important parapsychological projects in world history, the United States government's serious effort to understand and apply remote viewing abilities.
That's true. You want to know how that happened?
Yeah.
Actually, I honor and thank Mr. Ingo Swann, well-known psychic. He was the one that actually got me involved in the program at SRI.
As I recall, they were testing his psychokinetic abilities with a very expensive magnetometer.
Exactly right. And I was an experimental physicist. Hal was an engineer, a very competent Hal Puthoff, and Russ Targ was a physicist. But I came in, my job was to find out if there was anything wrong with that apparatus, and if so, what. That was my job there.
And so you became a part of the team at SRI, and they were already beginning to do some work for the military intelligence.
It started with the military intelligence. Actually, the first funding that Hal Puthoff and Russell Targ got was in late 1972. It was about $195,000 from the CIA. They had some private money on the side, but the major thrust was, look, if this stuff were real, and they got interested in it because they saw work that Ingo Swann was doing at the American Society for Psychical Research in New York, and they thought, well, if this is true, we doubt that it is, but if it is true, it has obvious intelligence operation implications. And so they invited Ingo out, and then Pat Price, and the whole history of the program can actually be found in Targ and Puthoff's book, Mind Reach.
And you were part of the project. You were hired on as a physicist and for about 10 years until you became the director.
Correct. I joined the program in late 1975, strictly as a consultant. In about 76, they upgraded my status to senior research physicist, and I worked closely with the team. And Russell Targ left the program in 1982. And Hal left it in 1985, and I became the director of the research program for the next 10 years.
Well, the important thing, I suppose, for students of this history is that the U.S. government funded this research and applications continuously for over 20 years.
I would debate you about the word continuously. I mean, it was like from 1972 to 1995, nominally about $22 million if you add it all up. And that sounds great. I mean, it's chump change from the Department of Defense, but it was a lot of money for us. But it was anything but continuous. There were long periods of dry spell, and the management was walking up and down the hall asking us, well, you know, you got 2 weeks before you have to leave, that sort of thing. And so it came in fits and spurts, but it lasted. And the interesting part is the government funded it basically for that long period of time.
And they did that because they saw some results.
Well, a lot of results. And in spite of the fact, a lot of people were trying to close us down. And what protected the program were a few individuals in the government who acted as saviors, if you will, between our project and the people trying to shut it off.
Some people very high up in the government.
Extremely high up. I can mention one now. Secretary of Defense under the Clinton administration, Senator William S. Secretary, William S. Cohen.
Former senator.
Former senator from Maine, he was a major supporter, and there was an article in Newsweek in November 2015 where he said how much he supported this program. He was one of a large number of protectors. Sadly, he's the only one I can name right now.
Well, the program had, as I understand it, 2 prongs, so to speak. There was the intelligence applications on the one hand, and the other hand, pure research designed to try and figure out how this stuff works.
Oh, I wish that were true.
Not so simple.
Well, actually, from about 72 up to the beginning of 1986, that was not true. We begged to have money to do research. We did all the operational spying, if you will, at that period of time. And we had three jobs. Do intelligence collection, spying. We had what was called foreign assessment. If we could spy, we wanted to assess whether other foreigners, like Russia, China, Cuba, could they do that, and was it a threat? And third one was to do operational research, not basic research. What we had to do is how to make the product better. No one was caring how it worked. And we fought and screamed about that. And we did a little basic research under the name of, well, if the Russians are making that claim, let's see if it really happens.
Because I understand, and I know some of this work is still classified, but during this period you produced maybe 100 research papers.
Oh, more than that. But the interesting thing is what is now classified. All the research is declassified from 1989 onward. There's no secret research. There's still some secret operations that probably should remain classified.
But we're talking now about nearly 90,000 pages of research documents or operational documents.
Yeah. The CIA, I think it was in 2000, released virtually the entire so-called Stargate record. Maybe I should say Stargate was a nickname. And what does that mean? It's an unclassified nickname. There were many. Gondola Wish,
Scanate.
Well, no, that was never a project name. Grill Flame, Sunstreak, and so on. And one is kind of amusing. I walked out of the Pentagon with a colonel, and he said, "Hey, we got a whole new name for it. It's called Quantum Leap." And I said, "Oh, gee, do we have to?" He said, "Yeah." And I said, no. Quantum leap progress is the smallest possible progress you could have above none. Can we rename the project? Well, we were stuck with it for a while.
Well, the program closed in 1996.
That's correct.
And I'm under the impression that there was a lot of political pressure at that time. And
well, it's a complex thing. And, there are a number of reasons it closed. And not everybody agrees with me. But here's part of it. During the Cold War, the main application was called strategic intelligence. Like, for example, there's a place in Kazakhstan, Semipalatinsk, for example. Been there for years and years and years, and everybody was trying to figure out what's going on there. That's a strategic problem. After the Cold War was over, there were still some strategic problems, but it shifted more tactical, like where's Saddam Hussein going to be in 20 minutes? And ESP, I think, is much better at the strategic problem and not very good at the tactical one. So that was one of the pressures that say, well, wait a minute. Another one is political. We had these protectors. Most of those had gone away. Thirdly, I think, and I'm not sure everybody agrees with me about this, but if you look carefully, we failed at one job. One job was, how can we tell a certain piece of psychic intelligence, is it good or not, a priori before we get any feedback?
How much confidence you would have in that information. We
were terrible at that job. And if you're going to invest resources, you'd better be careful about that. Now, a lot of the operational remote viewings that people talk about and now been released, and some really stunning ones, were never used in the actual problem. It was only after the fact. Well, had we used that, it would have been wonderfully successful.
In other words, actionable intelligence.
Yes. It would have been actionable, but people did not wish to use it because they didn't have confidence that it would. Let me give you one example, brief one. One of our super people gave me 18 pages spontaneously about an attack on when Ronald Reagan was president, on attack at the State of the Union address. And it was kind of like a 9/11 scenario. A plane would fly down the Potomac River and dive at the last minute into the Capitol. And a lot of details. And I thought, oh, gee.
Frightening scenario.
Frightening scenario. I went to our DIA project monitor, government minder, who was sitting with us all the time, and his name was Jim Salyer. And I said, Jim, what do you think of this? And he read it and he said, well, are you handing this to me officially? And I said, what does that mean? He said, if you're handing this to me officially, we will take action, and God help you if we're wrong. I had the worst 24 hours of my entire career worrying about that. One of the things, elements in that response was that President Reagan would be giving the State of the Union address with a foreign head of government who would be wearing a pink hat. It turned out it was Maggie Thatcher, of course. And out of this lengthy transcript, that was the only part that was right.
I see.
And so I did not hand it in, but I was really terrified, literally. It bothered me immensely. What if I'm wrong? And I hold it back, and we destroy the whole U.S. government.
Well, that's the problem with that sort of information, no matter how it was derived. I understand that in intelligence gathering, you want to have several different independent sources pointing in the same direction.
There were none in this case.
I mean, I had an experience, certainly apart from the intelligence community, in which a psychic called me up and said, Jeffrey, this is the most important message you will ever receive.
Oh, no.
And you must contact the U.S. government and tell them not to launch that next space shuttle. Well, that was about 3 weeks before the Challenger was launched.
Wow, that's impressive.
Said if they launch that shuttle, it will be blown out of the sky.
Wow, that's really impressive. Yeah. And it would have been nice if you had some metric to know whether that was right, wrong, or indifferent before.
And at the time, that particular individual, about whom I've written a book called The PK Man, had been not very accurate. He had made many inaccurate predictions, and even if he had been highly accurate, certainly no one in the government was about to listen to me.
Right. Well, let me tell you of another case. General Dozier was kidnapped off the street by the Red Brigade in Italy, right? And Joe McMoneagle worked that problem. Unfortunately, something like 15,000 others would-be psychics worked the problem.
That happens in every high-profile case.
I know. And the Italian police were going bananas.
Muddies the waters.
Oh, it was terrible. Yeah. In fact, they said, don't even bring this up anymore.
Yeah.
It was after the fact that Joe just nailed it.
And I know you have many cases like that.
Exactly.
But I gather that in some instances there was action taken.
Absolutely. There was a U.S. Drug enforcement case. The U.S. Customs or Drug Enforcement Administration, one of their agents went bad.
A rogue agent.
And he was selling drugs and what have you, and he was found out, and he fled. There was a nationwide hunt for this guy.
Right.
And the idea was that he was a sailor, so the smart money was that he was roaming around the Bahamas or somewhere like that. And long story short, Angela Ford, who was one of the best remote viewers that the government had, basically, literally almost, stuck a pin in a map and said, go there and find him. They used that with other information, and they went and collected the guy.
So that's one of the success stories.
And there are probably a handful of others. And if there weren't, the program would have died a long time ago.
Yeah. But when the program was closed in 1996, there was a review done, an independent review, in which the conclusions were kind of mixed, as I recall.
Yeah, it was conducted, first of all, the Congress ordered it, called a congressionally directed activity. Came out of the Senate and said, look, CIA, we ask you to please do a 20-year retrospective analysis, and if you believe this is worthy, then you are to take over the program from the Defense Intelligence Agency. Well, it wasn't such a good review. And in fact, they only looked at the last year. They only looked from the research point of view of the Science Applications International Corporation, only 10 studies. They only interviewed, I gave them a list of 17 or 18 end user names. They only interviewed one of them. I walked into a senior senator's office after that, and he said, can you refute this? And I said, yes, it's easy. So he tasked me to write a paper to refute it, and he, quote, told me, pull no punches. So I wrote an article in the Journal of Parapsychology, an analysis of them, and it's clear the fix was in before they did the study.
In other words, the CIA really didn't want to run an ESP program.
Well, I think it's more complicated than that. For example, do you know what the white crow fallacy is in philosophy?
Sure.
Yeah, okay. So
well, let's state it for our viewers.
The white crow. If I make a statement, there are no white crows at all, you can refute my argument by bringing one in.
That's right. If I say all crows are black, I can disprove that with a single white crow.
Exactly. But if I say, well, there aren't very many white crows, then we can argue about what it means, how many, right? I think the CIA made deliberately a white crow problem. They knew darn well that it worked. The problem is a lot of the classification of the Stargate program came about not because we were worried the Soviets would find out or what have you, or the Chinese. It was that our Congress would find out. And we were under threat of Senator Proxmire's early the Golden Fleece Award.
Well, you know, I'm from Wisconsin, which was Proxmire's state. And I remember when Hal Puthoff came to me and he said, we're afraid we're not going to be funded because our sponsors are afraid Senator Proxmire will award them the Golden Fleece Award.
Exactly.
So I wrote to Proxmire myself and asked him, how he felt about the remote viewing research, and is he considering designating that for the Golden Fleece Award of government waste. And he wrote back to me and he said no. He said, I have no intention of awarding the Golden Fleece to the remote viewing program.
Why didn't you call us up and tell us that?
I did. I passed the letter with Proxmire's signature on it to Hal Puthoff.
See, I never knew about that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Otherwise, you were telling me that story. You crummy, why did you bring this up to him? Thank you, sir.
So in some small way, I contributed to your ongoing funding.
Not in any small way. But it's nice that we knew about that, but I don't know how well Hal distributed that among all of our clients.
That I don't know.
I don't know either.
Yeah. At the time, I think I was still a graduate student.
Well, I don't care. It was wonderful. Thank you. The serious part of that, I've had an opportunity to spend a lot of time in Moscow dealing with former enemies, now close personal friends. They had the same problems we had. Everybody was trying to shut them down. And so they were using us the way we were using them to keep the program alive.
Well, there's a larger question here, which is, are governments really capable of managing programs involving parapsychology?
Good question. Some elements are. I mean, there are some absolutely brilliant people in the intelligence community, and those people are good managers. The problem is their bosses aren't so good.
Yeah.
And what their metrics, let me tell one brief story in overview. After the government program closed down, Joe McMoneagle and I spent about a decade trying to get something restarted again. And long story short, we had a client in the Pacific who was willing to move forward, and the person said, hey, can you give me political cover in the Pentagon? I said, well, I don't know. So I went and contacted a person, a friend of mine, and I got dragged around the Pentagon, and an Undersecretary of Defense said, yes, we'll go forward, no problem. I get back to my office. About 6 weeks later, I get a call from the government, from the Pentagon Controller Office, the guy with the money, right? And he said, well, we're ready to move forward with this $200,000 program. Isn't this cool? We will fax you the statement of work, what we'd like you to do for that money. Okay. I said, excuse me, I don't have a classified fax. And he said, not to worry, it's unclassified. I made probably the biggest single mistake in my entire career. What I should have done was to contact the person that got me into the Pentagon. I did not. I called this major person in the Pacific saying, wait a minute, I don't want this to be unclassified. That person withdrew the request, and all heck broke loose. They had promised me $10,000 plus expenses to go to the Pacific people and write this proposal, which Joe and I did. Turned out that they didn't like this female officer in the Pacific, and this was a way to embarrass her. They knew it would be in the National Enquirer the next day.
Well, that's the problem I think that government people face, is embarrassment, the horse laugh factor, because on the one side, when it comes to the population as a whole, you've got those who think that this is religiously prohibitive, the work of the devil. So, and then you've got the rationalists who say this is impossible, it couldn't exist at all, it's all fraud.
Right.
So there's a small group in the middle who can protect you, but only for so long.
Except this, it turns out, this whole exchange I just described had nothing to do with parapsychology. They hated the girl in the Pacific. It was a sexist issue.
It was office politics.
Office politics, and they were going to use us as a sledgehammer.
Well, when you add all of these things together, it's a miracle that the program survived as long as it did.
It is a miracle. Do I believe in miracles? Yes, that one I do believe in.
It seems to me, though, that the day will come, I don't know how long it will take, when governments will reconsider.
I think that's correct. I think if the parapsychology community are successful, this is going to sound strange, we'll put ourselves out of business. Because why should I be doing brain studies? I'm a physicist. I hardly know what a brain is. I'm the wrong guy to be doing that. People at neuroscience laboratories all over in universities are the right people to do that. So if we manage to get this the science of it mainstreamed, our job is done, and we should pat ourselves on the back.
That's your goal.
Yeah.
As a researcher, I understand that is to bring the whole field into mainstream science so that it's no longer even thought of as paranormal.
Exactly correct.
And that's probably the only way it could survive within large public institutions unless there's a huge cultural change.
Well, in the U.S. for sure, but as you may know, the geographical center of parapsychology research is in the U.K.
Right now.
And we can thank an expatriate American, the late Bob Morris, for that.
Yes.
He was the occupier of the chair of the Kersler unit in University of Edinburgh.
That's
Edinburgh
right,
University.
yes.
And he spawned, I don't know, something like 50 PhD students who fanned out across the UK, and they're teaching parapsychology and doing research.
And he was one of my professors for a while I got my degree at Berkeley.
I don't know if you know this story, that when he won the position for the chair, the psych department was nervous to even bring it up.
Yeah.
Later on, they were bragging about they were the center of parapsychology because, as you know, Professor Morris he was head of the British Psychological Society. He was well respected in the UK, and he was not nuts, to use a technical term.
Well, and it's wonderful that we have such people in the field. There are some very distinguished people doing work in parapsychology. Yes. You were certainly one of them.
Thank you.
Robert Morris, whom you mentioned, Stanley Krippner would be another person who is well regarded in their own disciplines.
Well, what I've loved about it, there's both upside and downside about interdisciplinary research. People like you are one of the best people I know that can put this out in a proper venue. That's a very important part of this. I know people who are psychologists, I know people who are spiritually oriented, and so on. It's a multidisciplinary task. No single one's going to solve the problem.
Well, Ed May, it's been a pleasure having this conversation with you, and I think it'll be very enlightening for our viewers for some time to come.
Thank you, Jeffrey. I appreciate being here.
Thank you for being with me.
Yes.
And thank you for being with us.